Hello and welcome to this special edition of Talk to Al Jazeera, coming to you from the headquarters of the Qatar Foundation in Doha. I am Abderrahim Foukara. I'll be talking to the US Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton. She'll also be taking questions from the students on various issues, including Iran and the Middle East peace process.
I know all of us, but especially our students, are delighted to welcome you today. On behalf of Qatar Foundation, welcome to Education City.
It is for me a personal privilege to be here and to see so many of the students who are part of this wonderful educational experience. I'm looking forward to our discussion today and to have a chance to share ideas, to answer questions, to explore in an educational setting some of the important matters that are being faced not only here in this country and region, but globally as well.
Madam Secretary, if the criteria for judging US-Muslim relations is the issue of Palestine, as millions of Arabs and Muslims seem to feel, they would say that those relations, taking that criterion into consideration, are not in very good shape right now. What say you to that?
Well, first, I'm delighted to be part of this exciting interview and town hall on Al Jazeera, and thank you for participating. The first thing I would say is that obviously, our relations with people around the world is much broader than any one issue, even an issue as important as the future of the Palestinian people and the conflict between the Palestinians and Israel. I think it is a mistake to only look at the United States and our role in working with other countries through any single prism. But I accept the fact that this is a critical issue. It's a critical issue to us. One of the very first decisions that President Obama made was that the United States would not be on the sidelines, that we would actively participate in trying to bring the parties into negotiations that would lead to a final resolution, and that it would result in a state for the people of Palestine, that they would have a chance to have their own future, fulfill their own dreams and aspirations, and that it would provide security for the people of Israel, that they too would be able to live side by side in a two-state solution. We have worked over this past year with both parties as well as other interested countries to try to bring that about, and I'm hopeful that this year we'll see the commencement of serious negotiations that will cover every issue that is outstanding. Obviously, those are the ones that have to be decided between the parties. No one can dictate to either the Israelis or the Palestinians what the outcome should be. They must make those decisions themselves. But the United States is very focused on being a facilitator and a help in every way possible to achieve that outcome. And we are working hard on it. We're working hard on it every day, and we hope that we'll see the kind of breakthrough this year that everyone is anticipating.
Madam Secretary, a lot of people look at the issue of settlement, Israeli settlement in the West Bank, and they wonder if the United States gives priority to the concerns of a few thousand settlers over its interest and its relations with over 1 billion Muslims. How do you counter that?
Well, the fact is that we do not. Our position is that settlement activity is illegitimate, and that the final resolution of borders has to be worked out that will give both sides, the Israelis and the Palestinians, the secure borders that they deserve to have. And both sides recognize that developments and swaps will be necessary in order to achieve the outline of the Palestinian state, but of course it will be based, as I've said many times, on the 1967 lines with the agreed swaps and taking into account the subsequent developments. Those are the very clear parameters that the United States believes that the parties should negotiate over. So that's been our position. It remains our position, and we think the best way to resolve the ongoing concerns that are reflected in the question and the feelings that so many people have is to get the parties into a negotiation facilitated by the United States and to assist them in whatever way we can to reaching a resolution on borders, on refugees, on security, on Jerusalem, that will once and for all end the conflict.
My question is about the war in Iraq. So ever throughout high school until today in my university years, I've been watching the Iraq war. People are dying, bombs are going off, and there are several deaths have occurred, a lot of thousands of deaths have occurred. And sometimes I wonder if America would be in Iraq if Iraq didn't have any oil.
Well, I think that what is happening in Iraq is very important on a number of fronts. And we are going to be leaving Iraq, and when we leave Iraq, as has been agreed to with our military, and we're on schedule to do that, we will hopefully have a relationship with Iraq as we would have with any other country. We hope to have a strong civilian partnership. And I think that the short answer to your question is we will be in Iraq as we would be in any country, whether or not they have natural resources. And the Iraqis themselves are making the decisions about the future of their oil industry. You may have followed the recent bidding that has been done, giving contracts to countries from all over the world, companies from China to Europe to the United States to the Middle East. That's the way it should be. The people of Iraq, through their democratically elected government, something they did not have in the past, should be making those decisions for themselves. That is really what the United States hopes will be the future of Iraq, that it will remain democratic, a strong democracy, a pluralistic society where every part of the country gets to participate, that there isn't any tilting of power for or against any group within Iraq, and that as part of their democratic future, the Iraqi people will have the benefits of their oil revenues. Not one group, not any individual, but the Iraqi people. And it is my hope that that becomes the reality for the Iraqis, that they benefit from their own natural resources, that they invest in education cities, that they build great healthcare facilities and housing for people. That is what we hope for them, and that is the direction that the Iraqi government seems to be headed themselves. So the United States is very pleased at the progress that Iraq is making, and the oil industry is broadly dispersed among many different companies and countries at the decision of the Iraqis themselves. That is the way it should be in our view.
Hello, Madam Secretary. It's an honor to meet you. But I was wondering, in regards to your plan here in Doha, the campaign is pretty much emphasizing to cut off support for Iran and their nuclear program, since you have evidence that they're indeed building nuclear weapons. Well, how do you plan to implement that, especially in the Middle East, taking into account that, for example, in Qatar, a vast majority of the population is originally Iranian, and you have much of the GCSE countries made up of Iranian descent, so how do you tackle that issue?
I think it's important to remember that when President Obama went into office a little over a year ago, he made it very clear that the United States wanted a different relationship with Iran. we've not had a very good relationship for over 30 years. And President Obama decided that it was time to try to change that. And I agreed that we wanted to reach out to the Iranian leadership and look for ways that we could begin to cooperate and have something of a more normal government-to-government, people-to-people relationship. And President Obama has reached out and has publicly and privately made it clear that we are extending a hand, but it is a two-way street to have any kind of engagement. We also believed that Iran's pursuit of nuclear weapons was very destabilizing for the entire region. People of Iranian descent may live in Qatar, but I think part of the reason why we're so focused on the nuclear threat from Iran is that it would be very destabilizing for all the countries in this region. And we believe that it is in violation of Iran's obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, in violation of a number of United Nations resolutions for Iran to pursue nuclear weapons. We've made it clear, and it's on the front pages of the paper in Doha, what I said yesterday, that Iran, like any country, has a right to peaceful civil nuclear power. We drew that distinction. Unfortunately, there has not been the kind of response that we had hoped for from the Iranian leadership. And therefore, we have pursued a dual-track approach. The engagement offer is still there, but it is important for us to work with like-minded countries here in the Gulf, in the broader region, and around the world who share our concerns about Iran's nuclear ambitions. And the world community has made those concerns very clear. We have worked with Russia and Germany and France and the United Kingdom and China to continually, over the course of this past year, make clear that we did not believe that Iran should pursue nuclear weapons. So where are we today? Well, on the nuclear front, we see Iran being exposed for having a secret facility at Qom. We see Iran refusing an offer from Russia, the United States, and France to help it get the enriched uranium it needed to run something called the Tehran Research Reactor, which makes medical isotopes, something that we are willing to support Iran to do for medical purposes. We see the president of Iran ordering the nuclear program to do its own enriching and to begin to move toward the level of enrichment that certainly is troubling to us because of what it well could mean with respect to nuclear weapons. We hear a lot of very negative language coming out of Iran, and we are deeply concerned about the way Iran is treating its own people and the way that it has executed demonstrators, imprisoned hundreds and hundreds of people whose only offense was peacefully protesting the outcome of the elections. You know, sitting here in this extraordinary campus where you're encouraged to think and speak freely, it's hard to imagine what it must be like now for a young person in Iran who wishes to have the same opportunities. So we're still hoping that Iran will decide to forego any nuclear ambitions for a nuclear weapon and begin to respect its own people more on a daily basis, to provide the opportunities that the young students of Iran deserve to have for their future. But we cannot just keep hoping for that. We have to work to take action to try to convince the Iranian government not to pursue nuclear weapons. And so that is our policy, and that is what we are attempting to do. And we think it's very important for this region, but it's also important for the world.
A lot of Arabs and Muslims look at Gaza. they look at young people in Gaza and they say, well, aren't those also worthy of an opportunity and of the US working to lift the siege on Gaza so that they can enjoy that opportunity?
And they're right. That's exactly how we view the situation in Gaza. We consider it a humanitarian crisis. It is something that I have worked on ever since I became Secretary of State. The United States has contributed many hundreds of millions of dollars to try to assist the people of Gaza. We have worked to encourage the lifting of the boycotts and try to get more important materials into Gaza. And I deeply, deeply feel the terrible situation that all the people of Gaza are experiencing. We have begun to deal with the immediate necessities of food and medical supplies, but we need houses for people to live in. We need hospitals rebuilt. We need schools that can function and provide an education. And we are continuing to push very hard for that to be realized. And we hope that once we get into the negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians, we will see more progress. We would also love to see Hamas renounce violence, agree to recognize Israel, and be part of that future. Because clearly we want to see a secure and stable Palestinian state that would include Gaza. And that can only happen if Hamas decides that it wishes to be part of the solution going forward. So this is a very serious humanitarian challenge that we feel very strongly about and are working to try to address. That is part of the larger political challenge that we think can only be resolved through finally ending the conflict and creating a state for the Palestinian people to live in peace and security and pursue the kind of everyday activities like educating their children that should be the birthright of everyone.
Do you think, Mrs. Clinton, that after September 11th, Americans started to change the stereotypes they had about Arabs and Muslims in general and started to try to communicate with the Arab world via Mr. Obama's speeches?
Well, I hope so. That is certainly our goal, and it is President Obama's vision and hope that we would overcome stereotypes and misinformation, misconceptions, because clearly the broad diversity of the Islamic world is something that Americans are learning more about and recognizing to a greater degree. But I think we have work to do, and so what we are trying to achieve is a broad program of outreach. And I have two young people here with me today, and I will ask them to stand up so that you can see them. One of them is our new special envoy to the OIC, Rashad Hussein, who the president has just appointed. He's a trusted advisor to the president, works in the White House and in the State Department on behalf of this important position. The other is Farah Pandith, who is our special representative to Muslim communities, particularly young people. And Farah has been working nonstop, traveling the world, talking with and listening to young people in Muslim communities from Morocco to Malaysia. It has been a very concerted and broad outreach. So both of these young people are part of President Obama's and my outreach, because we want to have the kind of conversation we're having today. You know, we will not agree on everything. I don't know any family that agrees on everything, let alone countries that have differences in experience and cultural views and the like. But we believe it is very important to have this kind of dialogue. we're also investing hundreds of millions of dollars in more educational opportunities for Muslim students to come to the United States, because the young woman's question raises one of the challenges. After 9/11, as some of you may know, America became very focused on protecting our citizens and made it more difficult for people to come to study and work in the United States. We're trying to, reverse that. We're also sending out science and technology envoys. We have Nobel Prize winners and other very distinguished scientists who are traveling the world, coming to countries, talking about what we can do in partnerships on science and technology. Entrepreneurship is an important area of our emphasis, and at the end of April, April 26, 27, President Obama will host an entrepreneurship summit at the White House, where we're identifying and bringing young people from across the Muslim world to be part of that networking and opportunity experience. So we're working hard on this, and we would hope that many of the Muslim communities around the world will, reciprocate by inviting American students, inviting American professors, inviting American business leaders, media personalities, because that's the kind of dialogue that we think will help to move us beyond the just very narrow focus that we've unfortunately seen too much of in the past.
Madam Secretary, why did the current U.S. administration turn its back on its EU and NATO Central European allies, Poland specifically, in the context of the missile shield program, and instead chose to accommodate Russia's demands, which are more appropriate for the Cold War era, perhaps?
It's a very good question, because I have the opportunity to explain our policy. And for those of you who may not have followed this issue, in the prior administration of President Bush, a decision was made to deploy a so-called missile shield into Europe, particularly Central and Eastern Europe, as a defensive measure against potential missile attacks, particularly nuclear attacks. When the Obama administration came in, we conducted a very thorough review of the prior policy. And we concluded that it was not aimed at immediate threats so much as longer-term threats, and that we could, with some changes in the architecture of the missile defense, be much more effective. And so we adopted a new approach. We did not eliminate missile defense. We changed how we were going to deploy it and the various technologies that would be used for it. And you may have noticed in the last week there were announcements of emplacements in Poland and Romania. Now, our belief is that there is a greater potential threat from Iran with the development of its missile program, and with other potential rogue regimes or networks of terrorists who get a hold of missiles, than there are from a European-Russian conflict. We just do not see that as a problem going forward. We may have political difficulties that we have to work out between the United States and Russia, or between Europe and Russia, but we don't see that as a kind of long-term threat, the way we unfortunately see Iran with its missile development and its pursuit of nuclear weapons. So the missile shield, which would protect into the Caucasus and down to Turkey, would provide some additional guarantee against threatened behavior. And we also are talking at length with a lot of our friends in the Gulf as to what more they need defensively in the event that Iran pursues its nuclear ambitions. So we still are very committed to missile defense, but we think we have a better plan that is more effective than the one we inherited.
Didn't the Aegis program, the Navy-based program that is going to be implemented now, didn't it fail most of its tests, the most recent one being last week?
But it's succeeded in most of its tests. I mean, that's why you test. You test. There were some radar problems with it, and it didn't hit its target. But we have a lot of data that shows it being successful. So I think you can rest assured that we're going to have a very robust, effective missile defense system that is the variety that we think will actually meet the threats that are on the horizon.
You said in your speech before the forum, the U.S. Islamic World Forum, that more pressure should be applied to Iran. And there are a lot of people sitting in the Middle East wondering, is the United States planning at any one time, whether before the withdrawal from Iraq or after the withdrawal from Iraq, planning to launch a military attack of one kind or another against Iran?
No, we are planning to try to bring the world community together in applying pressure to Iran through sanctions adopted by the United Nations that will be particularly aimed at those enterprises controlled by the Revolutionary Guard, which we believe is in effect supplanting the government of Iran. I mean, that is how we see it. We see that the government of Iran, the supreme leader, the president, the parliament, is being supplanted, and that Iran is moving toward a military dictatorship. Now that is, that is our view. And so what we're trying to do is to send a message to Iran, a very clear message, that we still would be open to engagement. We still believe that there is a different path for Iran to take, but we want the world united in sending an unequivocal message to Iran that we will not stand idly by while you pursue a nuclear program that can be used to threaten your neighbors and even beyond. And we hope to try to influence the decision-making within Iran. And that is our goal.
There's no plan on the part of the United States to launch an attack. Not in the immediate future, not in the middle term, not in the long term.
We are interested in changing Iran's behavior. And now we will always defend ourselves, and we will always defend our friends and allies. And we will certainly defend countries here in the Gulf who face the greatest immediate nearby threat from Iran. But we have pursued a dual track, not a triple track, but a dual track approach of engagement and potential pressure, and that is what we're focused on.
Mrs. Clinton, you mentioned earlier that allowing a nuclear bomb can harm the area, and you also mentioned that it can affect the balance of power in the area. But don't you think that the balance of power is already imbalanced because America is supporting the State of Israel and is allowing Israel to own a nuclear bomb? And my second question is, if we presume that a friendly country to the US, like Qatar, that could one day own a nuclear bomb, then what would the US reaction be to this?
Well, our goal eventually is to have a Middle East free of nuclear weapons. In fact, the president has set a goal of eventually achieving zero nuclear weapons in the world. I mean, that is our stated goal. We know that it will take time, and we are negotiating right now with the Russians to reduce our nuclear arsenal, because we are very committed to demonstrating our the importance that we place on this goal. So that is our goal. Now, I have spent a lot of time talking with the leaders and leading influential people from the Gulf and the broader Middle East, and they worry a lot about Iran having a nuclear weapon. And they tell me all the time that this is something that would cause them to have to react, and they don't want to. That's not something that they want to spend their money on, that they want to be involved in. But on the other hand, they don't want to live in a region where they feel threatened. So our goal is to try to convince countries not to pursue nuclear weapons, and Iran signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and they really bound themselves not to do so, and now are, we believe, reconsidering, if not violating that. So it is an ongoing challenge that we think the world has to face up to. The Non-Proliferation Treaty Conference will be held in May. President Obama is hosting in April a nuclear security summit. And maybe it's because we have to worry about all kinds of scenarios all the time. We know that a lot of countries around the world share our concerns, and therefore we want to talk about how we prevent the proliferation of nuclear weapons, how we control nuclear material that could fall into the wrong hands. We have reason to believe that Al-Qaeda would be very interested in getting its hands on nuclear material to make a nuclear bomb. And you know, this is not the Cold War. In the Cold War, the feeling was that you could deter each other, that no rational actor, no rational state would use a nuclear weapon on another because they would immediately be destroyed. So that kept everything in balance. When you have people who are willing to kill themselves and kill many others at the same time, that upsets the balance. So it's not like it was 40 years ago. Now we're looking at threats that are much more difficult to evaluate and control, which is why we'd like to move everyone toward a world in which we don't have nuclear weapons. We know that will take time, but we are pursuing it and we are committed to it.
What if Qatar or another ally of the United States decide to go for nuclear capability? How would you handle that?
Well, we would do everything we could to discourage it. Because even though we have great relations with our friends here in the Gulf, we don't think it is smart for more countries to be developing nuclear weapons. And given the legitimate concerns and even fears that some countries might have, that others would have it and they wouldn't have it, we would work to provide more defensive capability. Going back to the young man's question about missile defense, we would do more to try to persuade our friends that they would be protected and that they wouldn't have to do this on their own. So that would be our response.
What if another state, friendly to the United States, another ally of the United States, decides openly that they want to have nuclear capability for military purposes? How would you handle that?
I would give you the same answer. I mean, we have had these conversations, as you might guess, going back many years. A number of countries that thought about it, and this is public information, you know, like a Brazil or South Africa, decided not to pursue it. I mean, it is a very expensive undertaking. It requires enormous commitment of technical expertise and financial resources. And in the world as it exists today, it's not at all certain that it makes you safer. So I think a lot of countries who have done the balancing test have concluded not to pursue it. If a friend, an ally of ours, were to say, look, I worry about living in a neighborhood where a country that we're not friendly with has it and we don't have it, which is only the conversation that I think has been really active in the last year or two because of Iran, which is the focus of these conversations. Again, we would say, you know, we would hope that you would not do that, and we would try to reassure our friend that we would provide the defense and provide them with the defensive capabilities that they need to protect themselves from whatever that threat might be. That, I think, is the best way for us to proceed and for our allies and friends to proceed.
I'm returning to the Iranian issue again, referring to the current conference held in Qatar, which aims to bring together different points of view between the Islamic world, the Arab world, and America. Don't you think that the aim of this conference is undermined by the placement of American missiles in this region, which is very close to Iran? I think this might trigger a more hostile reaction from Iran, and this will not help in the overall aim of bringing the different views of the Islamic world and the US together.
Well, we have to look at how we can best work with or influence or coexist with Iran. And that is really at the heart of your question. What is the best way to get along with Iran? I can only tell you what so many leaders tell me, which is that they worry about Iran's intentions. They worry about whether Iran will be a good neighbor and will live peacefully. They know that Iran has funded activities that are against a lot of countries and people in the region. They know that Iran directly funds terrorist activities. So I think people have reason to worry. And the question is, what can Iran do in order to allay the worries and the fears of their neighbors? And that's what we are trying to encourage Iran to consider. And yet I don't see much progress there, to be honest. I just wish that we could tell you that there was more progress. And I don't know whether the reaction that the Iranian government had to the election and now the opposition trying to express itself, which we fully support their right to do so, has made the Iranian government even, more unwilling to open up and talk with their friends and their neighbors about how to prevent the concerns from escalating. I wish that Iran would take a different approach. That, the United States under President Obama would really welcome a positive, normal relationship with Iran. But you can't do that unless there's something coming back to you, and there hasn't been. So I wish that we could be having this town hall in Tehran. I wish that we could be having this conversation with members of the opposition and members of the government and students from all points of view, but we're not. So our challenge is, how do we try to influence Iran to be a good neighbor and to treat its own people fairly and decently? And anyone who has answers to those questions, I really would love to hear them.
Part of your job is to look after the interests of the state that is your country. But you're also a human being, and we all, as human beings, feel the need to achieve justice, whether in the Israeli-Palestinian issue or in other issues. How do you find that balance between being the Secretary of State and just Hillary Clinton?
Well, I find the balance because I think that my country and the people of the United States want very much to see other people around the world have the same rights and opportunities that we have. And it is heartbreaking when we see people mistreated or abused or deprived of those rights or suffering from natural disasters or war or oppression or other terrible events. We can't be everywhere at all times, despite the size and the reach of the United States. But the United States has been extremely generous and concerned about meeting the needs of people. And I personally believe strongly that that is part of our obligation on this earth, to reach out and provide help and support to those in need. So I think that the balancing act is not that hard. The prioritizing is hard because there is so much need and there are so many people who are suffering. I took a very long trip to Africa last summer and had a wonderful visit in many different places. But you go to a place like Eastern Congo, where more people have died in the conflict in Eastern Congo than any conflict since World War II. More than 5.5 million people. Yet we rarely talk about it. We rarely see it on television. women are raped and mutilated. People are driven from their homes. It is a horrible humanitarian disaster, and we're struggling to try to figure out a way to end the fighting and to give people a chance just to go back to their small homes and grow their food and raise their children, which is just the kind of common everyday living that everyone should be entitled to. So when you look around the world, there are so many challenges that the balance is not the hard part. It's trying to figure out what we can constructively do, how the United States can best intervene, how we can bring people together, how we can work with others to end suffering in Darfur or to try to provide a better life for girls to go to school in Afghanistan. I mean, it is a very long list, but I think you have to keep your heart open and you have to keep your mind alert to try to find opportunities to help wherever you can.
You're a woman from a Western society. We are women from a conservative Gulf society. What do you think is the key to women's success, and how can they achieve their goals? I ask you this as a woman, rather than in your capacity as Secretary of State.
Well, I think that women everywhere should be able to pursue an education and to have the opportunity to make important choices for themselves. But not every woman everywhere wants the same things in life, and we have to be respectful of our differences. But I do believe that there are certain basic rights that every woman and girl should have. And then for women to choose how to pursue your life, how to live with your family, and all of the choices that are so important to us. I have been very blessed over many years to have a number of close friends and associates of women who have been from Gulf countries or other places in the world, who are Muslim, who have a great pride in their heritage, but who also are very independent and very strong-minded and who make their own way in life. And I think that the education that you're receiving here is absolutely critical, because you will then have more opportunities. And you know, it's not so much about what one wears as what's in one's mind and one's heart and the kind of person one becomes. And I think that should be the emphasis as to how we look at girls and women's lives around the world. And you know, I've spent a lot of time working in Afghanistan. When President Karzai became president, there were a little less than 1 million children in school, and they were all boys. Now there are closer to 7 million children, and 40% of them are girls. And many families, even though they are conservative, want their daughters, just as their sons, to be educated. And so that's what we should be striving for. And that's why what Education City represents, and I'm sure you're aware of this, is so important, not only in Qatar, not only in this region, but far beyond. And the fact that young women and young men go to school together, study together, learn together, sends a strong message to the entire world. So that is my hope, that each young woman has a chance to fulfill her God-given potential, just as I hope the same for each young man.
Madam Secretary, just want to say thank you. I hope we'll have another opportunity for doing something like this down the road. And I want to thank the Qatar Foundation and everybody who's taken part in this program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It is important to remember that President Obama's vision was not one of a single country seeking to write a new chapter on our own. It was a call for all of us to take responsibility for retiring stereotypes and outdated views, and for bringing a renewed sense of cooperation. We recognize that there is not one approach that works for all people in all places. The concerns of a mother in Indonesia may differ from that of a student in Egypt, or a businessman in Doha, or an imam in England. But while their concerns may be different, they all matter to us. And during the past year, the Obama administration has worked to alter the tone and deepen the substance of our relationships with people from all regions and all backgrounds. We are and will remain committed to the President's vision for a new beginning. I hope that these trips help to underscore the importance that the United States places on engaging effectively and energetically, not only with governments in Muslim-majority countries, but with Muslim communities everywhere. Now, this engagement is not new to the United States. It's been important throughout our history. A strong relationship between our country and many others is a hallmark of what we believe is essential to global security, prosperity, and peace. President Obama and I believe that this is both a strategic imperative and a reflection of the bonds we share, the values, the hopes, the ambitions we hold as mothers and fathers, students and workers, business leaders and social advocates, and members of the human family. And finally, just let me say, look, we believe that we actually have so much more in common than what separates us. The real challenge is how we work together to solve these common problems that we face, whether it's Gaza or airline security or Iran. But that's what we're committed to trying to do, and as His Excellency the Prime Minister said, we're not always going to agree, we're not always going to disagree. We ought to narrow the areas of disagreement, enhance the areas of agreement, and look for ways to try to solve problems in between, and that's what we're committed to doing.